This morning, you know who finally acknowledged the tragic milestone of 100,000 American deaths from COVID-19, because he spent most of the last 24 hours ranting about Twitter trying to censor his free speech for fact-checking his misinformation about mail-in voting. He's issuing an executive order against the big tech companies today, and he may have an unlikely ally in Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Watch the clip.
Twitter decided for the first time ever to fact-check one of President Trump's tweets. I wondered if you thought that Twitter may have made the wrong decision here.
We have a different policy, I think, than Twitter on this. You know, I just believe strongly that that Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth of everything that people say online. I think in general, private companies probably shouldn't be, or especially these platform companies shouldn't be in the position of doing that.
Sonny, what is who actually have the power to do about this? I mean, they didn't fact check him. They just put additional information saying there's other information out there. So what's the difference between fact checking and what he's talking about, and does he have the power to do this?
Well, fact-checking certainly isn't censorship, which is, I think, what the president is complaining about. So he's not being censored. But he's also saying that, that he can sort of shut down these private companies. And that's really at issue here, because private companies are the First Amendment applies to governmental entities. So he really has very little power when it comes to a private entity. So I'm not quite sure what the executive order he thinks he can do with it, because it seems like his power, presidential power in this area is really, really limited. I mean, the Communications Decency Act was passed, I think, in the late 90s, and it protects companies like Facebook, like Twitter, social media companies from things that are posted by other people. They're just sort of a third-party provider. And when they take the extra step to fact check someone to make sure that the information out there is out there for everyone to compare for themselves, the law protects them in doing that as well. So I'm not quite sure where the president is trying to go with this.
Right. So, Joe, what do you think is really motivating all this?
Well, as she says, first of all, he loves Twitter, or loved it, because they didn't fact check him. And that's why he likes Facebook, and why he hates the New York Times and the Washington Post, because they are run by the FCC, I guess, and they have to, well, whatever. I'm not sure about the legality of that, but I know that they have the ability, and they do fact check the president, which is why he hates them. But because he wants us to believe that mail-in ballots are fraudulent. Meanwhile, Kayleigh McEnany, she just, we just found out that she voted by mail a dozen times in Florida. And Trump himself has voted by mail. Another thing, there's a primary for the Republican Party coming up in Pennsylvania, and the Trumpites are encouraging people to do mail-in ballots there. So I guess it's okay if it's on his side. If it's not on his side, then it's not okay, you see? But, right. And he even said himself, so, he said, if you ever agreed, let me quote Trump, if you ever agreed to mail-in voting, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. So this is what's behind it. He does not want people to vote by mail.
Okay. So, Megan, do you think that Zuckerberg has a point about social media platforms being hands-off when it comes to free speech?
I actually do, and I think it's really smart of Mark Zuckerberg to go on Dana Perino's show. She's obviously a former Bush administration official, and she works for Fox News. I think it's smart for him to be utilizing conservative media. I think the idea that Jack Dorsey is neutral or an unbiased person in all of this just isn't rational, and that's fine. Every CEO of every private company is free to have whatever political beliefs they want and believe, and he has publicly given donations to people like Tulsi Gabbard. I believe he's a proud progressive, and that's great. I think part of the problem here is I don't understand what anyone's talking about. So the president wants to censor a public platform where he has 80 million followers, and Twitter wants to start fact fact-checking tweets. Now, if we're going to go down this road, every journalist, every commentator, every teenager who says that they can run, 100 miles in 2 minutes is going to be fact-checked. That's not logical. You might as well shut down the platform in its entirety. I think all of this is kabuki theater on the parts of the tech companies and on President Trump, and I think they're all virtue signaling to each other's bases and audiences, and I think this is a complete waste of time, especially with 100,000 deaths right now. And by the way, the point about balloting you just said, Joy, that's not accurate. Arizona has voted red every election since 1953, and as Sunny pointed out a few shows ago, over 70% of Arizonans vote in by absentee ballot or by mail. So it's all of this is just trafficking in complete and utter inaccuracies and falsehoods. And I, for one, it's Thursday, we've had a long week, have no time for this.
I have to say, I find it go ahead, Joy.
Come on. No,
go ahead.
There's a delay.
I was just going to...
Go ahead, Vupi.
Right. All right. I was just going to say, I find it extraordinary since, as we said yesterday, I don't know any conservatives that have been constantly blocked. I know people have had issues with conservatives and liberals, and but for the most part, Twitter, people say whatever they want on Twitter. I, for one, am kind of glad that, they are fact-checking stuff that is, really having to do with everyone's health. When you're talking about, COVID-19, if you're talking about, what you can do at the ballot box, I want to know. Is that true? I want someone to say, here are articles that give you a different perspective. I don't mind that when it's coming, when it comes to those big things. I don't think people, teenagers who lie about how fast they can run or how many girls they actually took to bed, I don't think they have to worry much. But I do think that the government should be aware that people do want this stuff fact-checked. And if you are concerned about it, don't BS the facts. I just think it's, people have been mailing in ballots for my whole life, and I've never heard anybody say, oh, well, we can't do that. No, it's too much. But